Hello, Christian leaders. Welcome to Pastor with Dave Stone. I am Dave Stone. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled that you have joined us. And just like every week, we've got some great material that I think is going to really help you. Today's conversation will be a real encouragement to you and inspiration to you. If you don't follow us on Instagram, I would encourage you to go to Pastor Podcast, and you can follow us there. Also, I want to encourage you, since we are a new podcast, make certain that you subscribe to the podcast and let us know how it is that we're doing. We'd love any feedback that you might have, but we don't want you to miss any episode that drops. Every Tuesday, we drop a brand new episode. And today is going to be one of those ones where we actually navigate the intersection between ministry and marriage. And both are full-time callings. And too often, I see pastors sacrificing one for the other. And the reason I see that is because I've seen it in my own life countless times throughout my marriage and ministry. Times when my family received the leftovers rather than my best attention. And our guests today, Jud and Lori Wilhite, are going to do a great job of helping us navigate through the complexities of leading a church and also nurturing your marriage. Jud has been the pastor of Central Church in Henderson, Nevada, which is right outside of Las Vegas. His wife, Lori, is the person who was the founder of Leading and Loving It Ministry. It's designed to support pastors' wives and also women who are in ministry. And Jud has been an author. Lori's an author as well. You might hear Jud at times on K-Love Radio if you listen to that, as he shares different spiritual nuggets of spiritual truth that come straight from God's Word. Now, when I say that they minister in Las Vegas area, I know there's a lot of sirens that go off in your mind and a lot of different thoughts. I don't know what you picture. Maybe it's slot machines right there in the church lobby. That's not the case. I've been there and preached there several times. That's not what the setting is. But there are different thoughts that come into your mind. But let me assure you, God has planted them there for a reason. I know you're going to benefit from the conversation that we had with Jud and Lori. So your story, you all were in Texas doing a great work there. You felt called by the Lord to come to Henderson, Nevada, which is right outside of Las Vegas. What was that calling like? And tell me about that first year, Jud.
Well, I think, I remember the first phone call I had with the church, and I remember walking in and talking to Lori and trying to explain where this church was located. And I was like, it's in Henderson. And the first thing she says is like, well, how close is that to Las Vegas? And I'm like, well, it's pretty close, I didn't tell her I could see the strip from my backyard, but like it started off a little rough. Like we had a brand new baby and another baby on the way. And it was like, we're not going to move our family there.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, well, like, sure, maybe I'll be open to Henderson as long as it's not in Vegas. And it's basically Vegas. So, and now of course we love it. But at the time it did seem a little crazy to take two babies and move to Vegas. But it's actually been a really wonderful place to raise our kids.
Yeah. So we followed a remarkable leader. I know a friend of yours, Dave, and a friend of ours, Gene Apple, just tremendous leader of character and integrity, who had led there for many, many years, I think 17, 18 years, just phenomenal reinvention of that church. And really, when he left, it was healthy, it was thriving. So, then we come in, and I, at the time, was 32 years old. I just remember feeling like the general sentiment was, Gene had left and our best days are behind us, and now it's like, it'll be the long slide now to oblivion, sort of thing.
I know that feeling, my friend. I experienced that same feeling following a guy for 40 years.
Yes. So it's and all the listeners who've been in ministry know there's there's no perfect scenario. You follow a great leader, that has its challenges. You follow a terrible leader, that has its challenges, right? Like, I'm not saying they're all the same, but none of them are a cakewalk, that's for sure. And I think for us, you follow a longtime leader that's very loved and respected. You just aren't sure if you're going to be the leader that is able to survive that follow up. Often it's the leader after that, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we got started. The first year was interesting, and my goal in the first year, and I think this, unless the church is in chaos, this could be a word of wisdom. That first year, I spent a lot of time trying to love, learn, and listen. And I didn't try to go in and blow everything up. I just wanted to love the people well, figure out who they are, who God has called me to serve, and learn the culture. And that first year, I asked a million times, how did Gene do it? How did Gene do it? I wanted to, because I didn't want to blow I wanted to make that transition more seamless for them. And so there's a lot of learning and just a lot of listening. And I took my time because the church wasn't in crisis. It wasn't until about the end of that first year that we really started to make more just changes to where we all felt, the Lord was leading us into a new day. But when we jumped into that first year, I told Lori, like, as soon as we moved in, I said, hey, don't unpack all the boxes. I'm not sure we're going to make it. This might be we felt called to go. We didn't necessarily feel called to survive, if that makes sense,
It does.
Exactly what every wife wants to hear as they move to a new church.
Yeah. Don't unpack all the boxes.
Yeah, with a second child on the way, you're in limbo, and you're trying to process. Okay, we felt that God wants us here, but whether we're going to stay here and stick it out is another story. And I can recall some different times where you all have shared with me some of the pain of that. In a specific meeting, I remember where people just kind of aired their grievances at you, and you guys basically were a punching bag, and just hung in there with it. And I'll tell you what, most people would have left in the first year or the second year, but the fact that you all stayed at Central there in Henderson is unbelievable. And the fact that you did, I think, is part of why God has rewarded with you having such a huge impact on Vegas. So you're in Sin City. You're sharing this message of grace for all to hear. What's different about ministering in a place like that, in a larger city, than it would be maybe in a more rural setting?
Well, I think the human nature is the same, and the sin problem that we all wrestle with is the same, and the message of the gospel is definitely the same. I just think there's some lived experiences that are unique to rural life. I was raised in a smaller Texas town, Amarillo, Texas, and we could smell we could smell the cattle coming from Hereford, Texas, and we could it would be many miles away. You'd smell it, and we called that the smell of money. So so different lived experiences, and certainly in a city there's different lived experiences, and in Las Vegas there's its own unique things. There's a portion of Las Vegas that's very transient. So part of it is it's a touristy town. It's almost like a military town. A lot of people moving there for whatever reason, and finding that they brought their problems with them. They're not just going to go start over randomly, and not if they don't deal with all that stuff ahead of time. So they bring their problems with them, and a lot of them spin out. And then there's a lot of people in our context that once they come to faith, we encourage them to move back home. One of my first questions I'll ask people, especially if they're coming from a gambling addiction or some kind of an addictive behavior, where a place like Las Vegas, there's just temptation all around you. I'll just say, hey, where is home for you? Do you have family? Do you have friends there? I'm like, you may need to go back home for a while to reestablish whatever it is in your life as a new follower of Jesus. And we actually have done that with a lot of people.
Wow. That's really cool. And I've been out there, I think 4 different times in my life. And the times I've been out there, I'd see why there's such a great need for a church there. But like you said, Judd, the sin problem is just the same. Chip Ingram, I remember when he had been right in the heart of some satanic activity and New Age stuff that was going on where he was in Santa Cruz, California. And he went to Atlanta to be the president of Living on the Edge. And he used to say to me, but Dave, he said, you know what? I think the sin is worse in Atlanta, Georgia, because it's all steeped in hypocrisy, in acting one way on the weekend at church and then another way during the week. And I think one thing I appreciate about Central, the times where I've preached there's this openness. People don't hide their struggles. They don't hide the addictions. They say, this is what I'm getting help for. This is what I'm trying to grow from. So thank you guys both for serving there.
One thing I might add that I feel like has been helpful to us, that might be helpful to some of the listeners, is whether you're in a rural environment or a city environment, for us, it's been really powerful to see our calling to Las Vegas. And I'm coming up on 22 years now that we've been here. So,
wow.
We've really sunk deep roots here. And I feel like a huge part of how we've thrived and loved it is we saw our calling as missionaries. And when you see your calling as a missionary, whether it's to rural Tennessee or the Appalachian, or, like to, New York City or Chicago, when you see your calling as a missionary, you expect less from the culture of that city. In other words, you don't expect the schools to be the best schools in the country or whatever you may have preconceived. You're a missionary. You're in a foreign land. You're called to serve. You don't expect the culture to necessarily embrace your values. You don't expect everyone around you to kind of see the world the way you do. So for us, it lowered the expectations that we had of the place that we lived. In other words, we weren't discontent because of the immorality, or discontent because the schools, or discontent because, we just saw that as like, well, we're missionaries. We've got to hold tight as a family. We have to own discipling our children and discipling them, in our culture. And I don't think that's just a Las Vegas distinction. I think that personally, I feel like that could be a helpful thing for anybody called into ministry anywhere. It's helped us, I think, with longevity.
I'm so glad you added that, and I think every one of us can relate to that. And the longer that we do stay in a place, the more we should have that heart and that burden for that environment and for those people there. I want to change gears a little bit. Mother's Day is upon us, and I know, Lori, that you have done so much with pouring into women in ministry, and I know that you are a big part of Jud's ministry there, and that you have your own roles and responsibilities. But Lori, you started a movement, basically a ministry called Leading and Loving It. You can go to leadingandlovingit.com and you can learn more about it. But give us a thumbnail sketch of why you started that and who it's intended for.
Yeah. Well, initially it really came out of a season of carrying a decade's worth of insecurity and self-doubt and worry that I could not be what I felt like I needed to be when it came to being a pastor's wife. Like, I had such confidence that the Lord had called Jud. I was a little afraid he might have made a mistake with me. And I spent a good couple of years in like a pretty dark depression, and just worried that I was going to just mess it all up. Like, God was letting us do great ministry, but what if I messed it up? And as I kind of got back on my feet, and God started to build like a new confidence in my heart, and I realized that, Dave, don't be shocked, but God knew what he was doing when he chose us, and he chose me to be in ministry. And once I kind of figured that out, I thought, well, surely I'm not the only pastor's wife who has had these thoughts and these fears and had these struggles. And so I started Leading and Loving It 17 years ago now. And just with the goal to, help women lead strong in whatever role that they have, and thrive in ministry. Because you know what? Let's be honest. Sometimes we're leading and just kind of liking it, and sometimes we're leading and we're loathing it because it's hard. The goal, the goal is that we actually love what the Lord has called us to do, even in the ups and downs and in the hard parts and in the, all the victories, that we can really get to a place where we love what God's called us to get to do.
And that is a great summation of where the name came from as well, leading and loving it. And I know my wife has been to your conference. My daughter has been to your conference, and it's in Vegas this year, October 21st and 22nd, I think, right? And if you can't go to Vegas, you can watch it online and you can register and be a part of that. So please check out Leading and Loving It. I appreciate everything that you do for pastors' wives and for women in ministry. And I love the way you always advertise it. You'll say, this is for prayer warriors. This is for volunteers. And you go through all these different things because they are so integral to the entire ministry. So I'm gonna go a layer deeper on this, and I'm gonna dig into your all's marriage, because I can imagine this happening in my home early on in my ministry at Southeast. But there was a time where church was such a big part, taking up more time than it really should have. And Jud, I think you have shared that it was just tough. You had a hard time saying no to some things. And so you were diving in with both feet in those early years. And then you accidentally overheard a phone call. I get choked up thinking about it, and you haven't even shared it yet. Probably because it hits home with me, and I know it'll hit home with so many others. I'll shut up and would you share that story?
Yeah, so we were in the early years at Central, and in those, especially those early transition years, you just feel like you're kind of struggling to survive in the ministry. I felt like that old toy Stretch Armstrong that just gets you just pull his arms like 3 feet apart, and his legs. And I felt like that was definitely kind of our lives trying to keep it all together. And I was walking past one of our bedrooms. I wasn't like trying to hear what Lori was saying. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop on our conversation. I just happened to be walking down the hall, and I overhear her on the phone talking to one of her friends. And I just hear her say, I just feel like I'm a single mom. And I feel like even when Jud's here, he's not here, like emotionally. I'm raising these kids on my own. And it kind of stopped me cold in my tracks. It was all news to me. Like I had, I was just color me oblivious, right? Like I was shocked that I had kind of allowed it to get to that point. And she was 100% accurate, and I was 100% blind to it because I was just fighting to survive from a church standpoint. We were dealing with the first couple of years of a transition is when it really starts to get messy often. And people that have been there a few years start leaving the church or don't like the direction or whatever. And, so now you're trying to put out fires everywhere and tell people it's going to be okay. And I just felt like in the midst of all that, I just got kind of lost in it. And, that was a moment for me. And as soon as Lori got off the phone, I remember we sat down at the kitchen table, and I just confessed to her that I had heard that. And, I told her I was really, I was moved. Like it wasn't an anger thing for me. It was a conviction. Like, I need to repent, and, I'm sorry. And we started a conversation of what it needed to look like kind of going forward. I don't know. How do you recollect that?
Yeah, no, I mean all of that's exactly right. I had our son 5 weeks after we got here. And so, it's just a season when after you have a baby, you have such a limited ability to get out and to do things. And I didn't know anyone. And I knew he was doing what he needed to do for the church and get to know the people and to be in all the meetings and all the things. And I thought, okay, well, my role at this time then is going to be try to show up with shoes that match each other because it's crazy and I'm getting 2 kids ready for church. And 2, take one for the team. That's what I told myself. My job, take one for the team. Let him go do all the things. I'm just going to like hold the fort down. And
And you did that for a long time. Yes.
but I think as it went on, and I never at any point, and I will own this, I should have talked to him much earlier on, but because I had this mentality of like, this is just what the sacrifice I have to make at this point.
Martyr syndrome.
Yeah, a little bit. And so like, I'll just do what I got to do. And the longer it went on, I started to realize, well, there's no light at the end of this tunnel. I don't see a stopping point for this situation. And so I started to feel like a little bit of bitterness seep in, a little bit of, now I'm, really struggling with, it's easier for me to blame the church than to blame my husband. Right. Like, so have all of this starting to stir up inside me. And it was not a great place to be in our marriage. I felt like it had divided us. And I think I'm so thankful that he overheard me that day, because I don't know how long I would have waited and how much worse those thoughts would have become over time. So I feel like it's the grace and mercy of Jesus that he heard me say that day, because what it helped us do is we sat down and had a lot of conversations, but we had to start crafting what we wanted our ministry to look like and have conversations about what is the pace we can hold down for a long period of time, especially in this season of our lives with young kids, so that we can actually go the distance. Like, we don't want to be here or just forget Central. Like, we don't want to be in ministry for 2 years and then we've ruined our ministry, our marriage, our family. We actually want to do this for the long haul. So let's create the life and ministry we need to be able to do that. So it forced us to, ask some hard questions and to make some hard changes in our schedule, to make sure that we were building the family health we needed to be able to do the distance.
Well, as you're talking, I'm standing here and I'm thinking about some recent conversations that my wife and I had about our grandkids. And it was something to the effect of our son taking the grandchildren to church with the wife being out of town and not being there to help him. And I said, wow, boy, that's something. And then Beth lovingly pointed out to me with a great spirit, she just said, you never had to take the kids by yourself, ever. And we started replaying. And when all of our kids were young at the church where I served at that time, my wife would drive to a shuttle site and load our kids up on a school bus. The school bus would come and drop off because we didn't have enough parking at the place. We were in 4 services on Sunday morning. So I was there at church at 7 o'clock in the morning. If you can imagine, we had a service at 7:30 in the morning. We called it the Frozen Chosen.
Wow.
And so I never took the kids to church in all of my their early years. And I hear Lori talking and I'm thinking there's got to be some husbands who are listening to this, and maybe your wife isn't listening. And this is a wake-up call to you. Just imagine, could you have heard that conversation said in your own home with your wife on her mobile phone as you walk past and accidentally overheard that? And if that's the case, what can you take off of your plate? How can you sit down and have that conversation and say, hey, I feel convicted on this. I know I need to do better. How can I be a better husband? And I know that there are also ladies who are in ministry and they have husbands who are on that same side of the equation, where the church gets the first fruits of their time and energy, and then the kids and the family sometimes get the leftovers. How can pastors, I'll make this an open-ended question to both of you all, how can pastors and their spouses work together to protect their marriage from the spiritual attacks that aim to destroy it? Because we see a lot of people being knocked out of ministry due to poor choices. They didn't set out to make those poor choices, but but they made unfortunate choices. And it cost them a ministry. And as a result, the witness of Christ is tarnished. What would each of you say to ministry couples to encourage them as far as being ready for Satan's attacks?
I think it's really important to embrace ministry as a family calling. Not his calling, not her calling, but like it's a family calling. The Lord, we're in this together. We are a team. It doesn't mean that we're, doing all the same things, but it means like we're gonna take on ministry as a team. And I think what that does is foster unity, gives you permission to be able to process together, get on the same page together. But then it also enables you to kind of pray from a different place of understanding, but also like a different heart connection to the work you're doing. And so that is part of it, I think, for us, is just being reminded regularly, like we are in this together as a team. And I think that's made a big difference in our marriage and ministry as well. But, and then the flip side, I think, you can do all the things about setting up accountability, make sure you have a daily or a weekly date or whatever. And all of that is wonderful. And we should do all of those things. But also, I always say accountability is only as good as the honesty people bring to it. And so much of what needs to happen here is just honest communication. When it's not good, we need to speak up and say it. We don't need to be overheard on a phone. We got to speak up and talk about it. And if we're struggling or, it in times where I've been really discouraged or he's been burned out or whatever, to like sit down and have honest conversation. Here's exactly where we're at. Then it gives your spouse the ability to know how to pray for you, know how to support you, know how to come alongside you. And, praise the Lord, we haven't had those moments at the same time. But it feels like somebody is always needing that kind of support from each other. But you can't assume people can read your mind. So the honesty that we can bring to conversations in our marriage, I think, builds in accountability, and it builds like not just a hedge of protection, but maybe a moat on the outside of it too, because then you actually know what's going on in the heart of your spouse.
Yeah, that's, and I think like some of the simple things that pastors teach others to do, we don't always do ourselves. For instance, most of your listeners that have taught around marriage, I've lifted this idea of like, sometimes it's just helpful to ask your spouse, like, how are we doing on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, I need you to idiot proof it for me here. But Lori can tell you, I still do that in our marriage, because I've realized how much I can miss things that are supposed to be right in front of me. I want to believe I have a certain spiritual gift of wisdom, which is questionable, but I can promise you when it comes to my own marriage, I don't. And, like I need to just sometimes, so periodically we try to, go out for coffee or something, and I'll just, how are we doing on a scale of 1 to 10? It just opens up the conversation. And I think that's helpful.
And if it's an 8, he's happy to get a B. But if it's a 4, we got some work to do.
Hey, I'm not shooting for a 10. I'm realistic over here.
Hey, that's right. Lower those expectations, right?
That's right.
But you said it earlier. When you heard that phone call, you're listening accidentally in this other room, and you're oblivious to it. And that's how we get in ministry, because everything revolves around what that next project is, that next message is, that next program. And we get so caught up in that sometimes we are oblivious to the needs of our spouse. I liked what Lori said. I didn't like it, but I could relate to it. When you said, Lori, on that phone call, and even when he's here, he's not here. Oh boy, I have heard that line countless times in my 39-year marriage with Beth, and it even got to the point where it wasn't just my wife saying it to me, but I had an executive pastor who was doing a yearly evaluation with me. And he said, Dave, I'm going to give you one tip. Wherever you are, be all there. And I knew what he meant. I can be so distracted. I can be going all these different directions. And not only is that bad for the person who I'm speaking with, but additionally, if my family feels that way, then we really have problems. And I've been in your home, Emma and Ethan. You guys have every reason to be proud of them, and the fact that they love the Lord is a testimony to the way that you all have led. And I appreciate the example that you guys have set for your church, in your marriage, and with your family.
Well, our daughter was on a podcast. She's 24 now, and it was a podcast about growing up in a pastor's home, and she loves the Lord, and has.
I'm sure you didn't listen to what she had to say.
Yeah, oh
You
yeah,
didn't want to
right.
listen to that,
I
right?
listened on pins and needles.
Well, I was going to say,
like, oh man,
fingers crossed, praying.
This could go sideways. But one of the things she said that really hit me hard, and I'll qualify it after I share it. Is she said, when I was growing up, I can't remember a single time I ever heard my mom or dad run somebody down in the church or talk bad about somebody. And she said there were times where we're like always listening as kids when they're in the kitchen and we're in the other room or whatever. And she said, all my memories are of them celebrating with each other a life change step somebody took, or celebrating a relationship that's being restored, or, like talking about all the good things happening in the church. And she said, I knew there were hard things, but they didn't really talk about those. They talked about the good things. Now, I think God had a lot of grace over that. There was a lot that apparently she didn't hear. That was still sad. But, that really floored me, the grace of God, but also how important it is in our homes for our families and for each other, how we are intentional about, we need to share the hard things sometimes with one another, but also we need to share probably much more about all the good things that God is doing in people's lives.
Yeah, I think a tendency can be, especially in a marriage, is to come home and be like, here's all the hard things. This person hurt my feelings. Can you believe they said this? Or this hard thing happened at the office. And then what happens is he'll go back to work. That gets worked out, but he doesn't ever come back to me and tell me it got worked out and they had a great conversation. So what I'm just left with is I'm holding on to, well, I'm just real mad at that person. They hurt my husband's feelings. I don't feel good about them the next time I run into them at the lobby. And so when you can shift that and pull it around celebrations, like even the celebration is, oh my gosh, can you believe we had a great conversation and it was hard, but it was really good. And we're excited about moving forward together and we're on the same team, but just kind of shifting it to finding ways that God is moving, ways that we can celebrate instead of just talking about the hard. We got to talk about the hard. You got to do it, but also making sure that we're celebrating all of those things as well, just to keep it balanced.
Yeah, you guys have done a great job of that, and it's obvious and evident. And Lori, when you talk about being positive, that sounds like a small thing, but if you're listening to this right now, I want you to try to think in your mind, oh, if I were to ask my kids, what would they say? Would they say that I speak glowingly about the church? Yes, Jud and Lori are realistic, and I'm sure they would share things when there were struggles at times, but it would be age appropriate. You don't saddle a youngster with those thoughts. It's more in those teen years where, hey, be praying for dad, be praying for mom. We're going through some satanic attacks where we feel like some spiritual warfare is taking place. And also, I just would say that positivity will bear great dividends in years to come. And we've seen that with our adult children. I can remember every one of our kids went through that phase where it was like, well, I'm the pastor's kid, so, I can't go to that movie, or everybody else has got a cell phone and I don't have a cell phone yet. And they go through all these different reasons. And so I started looking for those settings where I could point out to them, it's pretty rough being a pastor's kid, isn't it? And I remember Sam was in 9th grade and he was going through one of those stretches where, I can't do anything. I'm the pastor's kid. And around that time, I brought Bear Grylls in to speak at Southeast. And Bear Grylls was at the height of his popularity with Man versus Wild. And so my son loved him. And he was up in my office before the program. And I had a conference table that we put a ping pong net on. And my son and I used to play ping pong in my office all the time. And so Bear liked to play ping pong. And he and Sam got in a 2 out of 3 intense match going back and forth, back and forth. And one time Sam spiked on him and the ball went flying all the way across the office and Bear went to get it. And I was walking past Sam and I just whispered in his ear, I said, really tough being a pastor's kid, isn't it? So it's because sometimes you have to just remind them.
Yeah,
You
the
have to
benefits.
say, hey, you get to do a lot of things that other people don't get to do. You get the free snacks. You know where they are in the church. You get dibs on the lost and found stuff after a month. You know, you've got all these different things. So let's dwell on the cool part of being in ministry rather than the fact that it's always the complaining part.
Yeah. And Dave, it's not like choosing that more positive celebration kind of moment is easy. It's not. It's hard. It's a fight for it a lot of times. I remember we went through just a really painful situation. I remember sitting, I think my kids were down for a nap, and I was sitting on the bottom step of our stairs and I'm just bawling. I'm bawling. I hadn't eaten in a couple of days. I was just so upset. And I remember hearing like so clearly from the Lord, like, you are so distraught because you have put the thoughts and feelings of these people who are mad at you above my thoughts and feelings. So that's called idolatry and you need to work that out. And
Wow.
and I remember thinking in that moment, I was like, okay, what I have to start fighting to do, like I'm gonna have to fight for it, but I'm gonna have to start fighting for, what do I believe the Lord is doing? What do I see him working? How do I see him moving and changing lives? I have to see it. I have to call it to mind regularly. I need to celebrate it in my life because it's going to help me keep him at the top. And that is not done easily. So I don't want to make it sound like there's some days that it's like a real search, a real search for some celebration. But I think it's important enough, because otherwise what I do is I get inundated with, none of us get into ministry to disappoint people or to hurt people, but those things happen. And, but I think just finding ways to celebrate help offset some of that. But it's a fight to do it, but it's a fight that's worth it.
That's a great place for us to wrap up. And I appreciate the fact that both of you all have been willing to be in that good fight, and that you continue to be, and God is blessing you in great ways. And Vegas has a lot more grace that's been dispensed and received because of the ministry of both of you all. So thanks, Jud. Thanks, Lori. Thanks for sharing your hearts with us and giving us a peek behind the scenes in your lives.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Dave, we appreciate you a lot.
Boy, you talk about marriage and ministry, and it really hits close to home. I took so many notes just listening to Jud and Lori, and there were things that stood out to me. I loved one of the most painful parts is when Jud shared that story about overhearing what Lori said on the phone to a friend of hers when said, I just feel like I'm a single mom. And I think every single one of us had a lump in our throats because in Christian leadership, we know that there are times when our spouse does get those leftovers. And then to go the layer deeper with the next painful line of saying, even when Jud's here, he's not here emotionally. And that's a wake-up call for all of us. And maybe part of the reason that the Lord had you tune in and follow this podcast episode is because maybe he's trying to speak something to you. And if that's the season that you're in right now, take it, accept it, and say, okay, how can I be better? And have that conversation with your spouse. The concept of speaking positively about the church in front of your kids, boy, that will go such a long way in painting a picture and casting the vision for how you want them to see Christ and also his church. And when Jud just talked about the intentionality of in that first year of ministry, trying to do 3 things, trying to love, learn, and listen. boy, that's good for all of us, not just in ministry, but also in marriage. There's a carryover that with loving and learning and listening. And if we were to do that in our ministry and in our marriage, I think the sky's the limit for what God can do in both of them. Check out Central Church. Make certain that you check that out, their website, but also check out Leading and Loving It. For those of you who are women in ministry, or if you have a spouse that is a woman, leadingandlovingit.com. They have some great things that I think can be a real encouragement. My story that I want to share today really just comes back from the scripture in Matthew chapter 16. And it comes to my mind because of the fact that Jud talked about when he came to Central, he really felt like a lot of the people in the church felt like the church's best days were behind rather than ahead. And maybe you find yourself in a ministry where there are a lot of people that talk about the glory years and the glory days, but they talk in the past tense rather than in the future tense. And I just want to remind you of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 16. There's that passage where Jesus takes them to Caesarea Philippi, and he asks that question of his disciples. And Caesarea Philippi was kind of like Las Vegas, New York City, kind of mixed together. It was a cosmopolitan city that was known for finances and further thinking. So think of Hollywood, Las Vegas, and New York City kind of all meshed into one. And it's in that setting where Jesus says, "Who do people say that I am?" And you know that eventually Simon Peter answers that question and says, "You are the Christ, you're the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven." And he said, upon this statement, upon the fact that I am the Son of the living God, I will build my church. And you know the next phrase, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Why would I share that with you? I would share that with you because of the simple fact that we have a lot of leaders in churches today who are just trying to hold on. They're just trying to survive. And it's like, okay, and they just kind of cower in the corner rather than boldly sharing their faith. And as a result of that, they're just kind of just waiting for Jesus to return. Are you leading the church, or are you just trying to hold on? Are you resting upon the laurels and saying, well, I do believe that the best days are in the past and instead of in the future. And so it's like, I'm just holding on until Jesus returns. And yet look at the wording in which Jesus says it. I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. What is a gate? Is a gate an offensive weapon or a defensive weapon? I've never heard a leader say, okay, we're going to go into battle. Everybody grab your gates. No one would say that, because a gate is something that you put up as a defense. It's not something that you go on the offense. So look at what Jesus says. I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. In other words, we're not the ones who are just cowering and waiting. We're the ones who are offensively marching and moving. And Satan is the one with the gates. Because as the book of Jude says, snatch people out of hell. That's what you're called to do. You're called as a church leader to rescue those who are heading into a Christless eternity. And our job is to go on the offense. Because if we go on the offense, the church, the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So strive to be that church that God is calling you to be. And don't talk about your church in the past tense. Talk about it in the present and the future for what it is that God wants to do. We've talked about marriage a lot in this episode, and your marriage is critical to the success of your ministry. And we want to come alongside of you. We know that the majority of you who are listening right now are married. And Focus on the Family is offering something special for you. I want to make certain that you hear this. It's free. There's no cost, because Focus on the Family cares about your ministry and cares about your marriage. And so what they're offering are free pastoral marriage getaways just for you and your spouse Amidst all your pastoral duties, marriage getaways provide a rare chance to focus solely on nurturing your relationship with your spouse. Enjoy a 3-day, all-inclusive stay at one of Focus on the Family's beautiful retreat centers. It's our gift to pastors and their spouses. And spots are limited, but book your free mini sabbatical today. All you got to do is go to thefocusedpastor.org/getaway. And we'll put that in the show notes, but this might breathe life into your marriage. And if it breathes life into your marriage, I promise you, it will breathe life into your ministry. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey. You know that every Tuesday we drop a brand new conversation on Pastor to Pastor. Make certain that you subscribe to the podcast, spread the word with others. Follow us on Instagram at Pastor to Pastor Podcast, and you can stay up with different things that are taking place in the weeks to come. It's designed to encourage, inspire, and to challenge you. If you found this episode helpful, please tell others about it. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts or on YouTube or at the Focused Pastor channel. Leadership can be lonely. We call this Pastor to Pastor for a reason, to remind you you're not alone. Until next time, God bless.